Okay, let's get started. We have a lot to cover today, so I want to make sure we can get through everything. So welcome everyone to tonight's webinar. My name is Rafi Shulman, and I'm the co-founder of Olim Advisors. I'm a bit under the weather, so I apologize for my voice. Just bear with me, and hopefully it'll be okay. I want to take a moment and welcome the other presenters who are joining me tonight. So we'll start off with Asher and Dalia, who have made Aliyah to Modin. Hi guys.
Hey everybody.
Hi.
Then next one is Lillian Aaron, who made Aliyah to Efrat. Hi Lillian. Now then the next one is Harriet Markle, who made Aliyah to Jerusalem. And last but not least, Naomi Shicker, who made Aliyah to Ramat Shemesh. Naomi actually made Aliyah as a client of Olim Advisors, and now she's working with us as an advisor, and she was instrumental in putting all this together. So thank you all for joining us tonight. I really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Over 120 people who have registered from around the world, and I always find it so inspiring to see that even with everything that's going on in Israel, with the war and everything that's going on in the world, the people that are still thinking about making Aliyah, the people that are still planning Aliyah, the people who have actually arrived in Israel over the past couple of months during the war, and it's really inspiring, it's encouraging to know that there's so many other people from around the world that see Israel as their home and want to eventually get here, whether it's in the next few months, the next few years. You know, it's really, as we say, welcome to you, congrats to you for looking into it, for thinking about it, and we really want to encourage you to see it through. Just a few quick things before we get started. The first thing is that we will be recording this, so if you've come late or you have to leave early, don't worry about it. We'll send out an email probably either tomorrow or Tuesday with a link to the recording so you can watch it again at your convenience. Also, please share it with anybody else who you think might benefit from this information. I know that a lot of people wanted to join tonight and just for a number of reasons weren't able to, so feel free to share the recording with them as well. We'll have our contact information at the end, so if you have any questions, definitely reach out to us. We're also going to reach out to you in the upcoming days and weeks because we know that we can't cover everyone's questions and everyone's situation in this webinar, and we know that everyone has their own concerns, their own questions, their own goals and plans. And so we want to encourage you to reach out to us and schedule a one-on-one call. Let's figure out what you're trying to do together, and let's help you with that. And then the last thing is that we will do a Q&A session at the end. So feel free to put your questions in the chat window. And when we get to the Q&A session, we'll try and cover as many of the questions as we can. Okay. So I want to just take a quick moment, and for those of you who are not familiar with Olim Advisors, tell you who we are and why we're putting these webinars together. So we started Olim Advisors back in 2016 with really two goals in mind. The first goal was to help people and encourage people to make Aliyah. So when you think about making Aliyah, you have these big important questions and decisions that you have to make, like finding the right community, finding schools if you have children, renting a home or buying a home from abroad, and then a lot of other things like healthcare and shipping and so on and so forth. And so we're here to help you make those decisions, to help you find the right communities and schools that best suit your needs. And then once you get to Israel, there's obviously a lot of challenges that you have to deal with. And so we're here as in essence your go-to resource as things pop up, from dealing with the bureaucracy at the beginning to just dealing with ongoing challenges that come up, because it's a different culture, it's a different language, and a lot of people like to know that they have somebody to turn to. So, it's just something for you to keep in mind. Again, we're happy to answer your questions and to guide you. So that was really the initial goal of starting Olim Advisors. And since then, we've also expanded into helping people find their own home in Israel. Buying a home, renting a home in Israel is very challenging, and it's an integral part of a successful Aliyah. So we now also help people through that entire process of buying a home in Israel, from finding communities to finding the homes. And of course, we have a network of real estate professionals that would be happy to introduce you. So that's just a little bit about us. Now let's get started with the presentation. So the first thing is, there's a number of reasons why we really believe that now's the time for you to start thinking about making Aliyah. Now, Please note that we're not saying that you should drop everything and come to Israel today or next week, next month. Obviously it's challenging to come to Israel while the war's going on, but there are things that you should start thinking about and planning for. And that's why we think that now's the time for you to at least start thinking about it and start doing the research. The first thing, of course, is just the rise of anti-Semitism around the world. And I really don't want to focus on kind of the negative aspect of this. We want to focus on the positive reasons why people should be making Aliyah. But the reality is that, throughout the US and the world, it's no longer just small towns, it's, capitals, it's countries. And so this is really giving people, for the first time, for a lot of people, kind of impetus to think about making Aliyah and to plan for it. So that's, one of the reasons why we think it's something that you should start thinking about. Now, in terms of the other side of the coin, there's a lot of positive things about Israel and a number of reasons why you should start planning for it now. First of all, the process takes about 6 months, or it could take even longer. And I know a lot of people have heard about, the process and they've heard that maybe the horror stories, but it's really not that bad. If you have your documents in order, Nefesh does an amazing job, the Jewish agency do an amazing job. You just need to work with them. You need to be as responsive as possible. But keep in mind that it does take time to go through the process to gather your documents and to get approved for Aliyah. So that's something that you want to start thinking about sooner than later. Especially if you have children, I always recommend that people come in July. And why July and not August? Just because it takes some time for everyone to acclimate and to adjust. So if you can come in the beginning of July, middle of July, that means that your kids and you have 6 weeks to 2 months to really adjust, to make friends, to kind of get settled in before school starts. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to do that. When we made Aliyah 2 years ago, we came on August 25th, so literally a week before school started, and our kids settled in and we did fine. But if you have that option, then I would definitely recommend that you come earlier in the summer than later. It will just make the whole process a lot more manageable for you. Another thing to keep in mind, and this was a big issue why people were hesitant to make Aliyah in the past, is that they didn't want to give up the careers. A lot of us spent a lot of time, a lot of effort building our careers, getting promoted, and a lot of people felt that if they made Aliyah, they would have to start from scratch. They would have to reinvent themselves. And now that's no longer the case in so many different situations. A lot of companies allow people to work remotely, and if you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you can work remotely, then this is something that really will make the Aliyah process much easier for you. And so if you are able to do that, you don't have to worry about searching for a job, then it's something that you want to start working towards sooner than later. Another important thing to keep in mind is that there are a lot more options when it comes to education and support for older kids. So if you were to ask me a few years ago, what's the cutoff more or less for children? I would tell you if your child's around 10, 11 years old, that's probably the oldest that you want to make Aliyah, because it gets a lot more challenging as they get older. Now there's so many schools and so many programs and so much more support that a lot of people are making Aliyah when their children are 14 and 15, 16, or even 17 years old. And it's just something that now makes the Aliyah process doable, where perhaps a few years ago, if you had older kids, you would maybe think twice about it. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, we can share more specifics about the different programs in different schools that are available. Another thing to keep in mind is the healthcare. This is something that really became very, came to the forefront during Corona, where a lot of people made Aliyah because they wanted to take advantage of the Israeli healthcare system, which really is phenomenal. And so if you're worried about this, if you have medical issues, or maybe you're getting older and you have, you're more concerned about it, I want to put your mind at rest and say that they're, phenomenal doctors, phenomenal hospitals, phenomenal healthcare providers here. You do want to make sure that you take the time to do the research and find the right coverage and the right doctors. But having healthcare or not having access to healthcare is no longer a concern for a lot of people, and it's something that really lets people realize that they can make Aliyah now. They don't have to. This is not one of the concerns that they have to worry about. And then the last point is that people used to make Aliyah, and in essence, it was a one-way ticket. They would make Aliyah, they would say goodbye to their friends and family, they would sell their business, they would sell their home. And for that reason, a lot of people didn't want to consider Aliyah. Now we're seeing a lot more people that are going back and forth. It's in essence the best of both worlds. They'll make Aliyah, they have the benefits, the financial benefits, and all the other benefits that you take when you make Aliyah. And a lot of people will just spend maybe 6 months in Israel and 6 months in the States, in UK, or South Africa, or maybe they'll go back and forth for family functions or for business. And so this is one of the reasons why in the past people were very reluctant, very hesitant to make Aliyah because they really felt like they were saying goodbye. Now it's an opportunity for you to come here to perhaps live the life that you've always dreamed of, but still have the opportunity to go back and forth. Okay, so these are just a few of the reasons. With that, I'd like to hand it over to our Olim to talk a little bit about their experience and share some tips with you. So Naomi, why don't we start with you?
Okay. I made Aliyah to Ramat about a little over 2 years ago. I was very lucky because I was able to convince my 2 older sisters and my parents. So I think Olim are all incredible. And I think that when you come to Israel, it's strange because a lot of the Israelis look at you like you're some type of hero because you left the comforts of America to make Aliyah. And that feels really good. But I kind of feel like, well, I moved with like 90% of my family. So I really got lucky with that. We moved, it was kind of the middle tail end of Corona. So things were a little bit different than they are now. I just have to say, whenever I speak to people about my Aliyah experience, it's very much intertwined with my experience with Olim Advisors, because even before I started working for them, because they just help from the time we made the decision to make Aliyah, getting us through the whole entire journey and beyond. Moving to Ramat Beit Shemesh is wonderful. It's considered a very soft landing because of how Anglo it is. And I will say that in and of itself has its pros and cons, because if everyone around you is speaking English, then learning Hebrew comes a little bit slower than if you move to a more Israeli neighborhood. But it's also great because when we moved, my oldest was already almost turning 10. So it was like a nice soft landing for him to find a group of friends that spoke English. So that's just something that to consider when you're thinking about where you want to move. If you want to move somewhere more Israeli, your kids will definitely pick up Hebrew a lot quicker. But if you move somewhere more Anglo, it'll probably feel a bit more comfortable initially. Should I continue talking about the tips? Is that?
Yeah, sure. If you have 2 or 3 tips, that'd be great.
Okay, yeah. I do have a few tips. I would say before you make Aliyah, definitely do as much research as you can. I think that if you know where you want to move, or if you have friends in Israel, you should speak to your friends in different neighborhoods, different communities. Ask them honestly what they think. Would this be a good fit? Would that be a good fit? I spoke to my friends here and they were like spot on about like exactly which neighborhood we would fit into, and it was really helpful. I think just speaking to as many people as you can really helps a lot. If possible, it's great to visit. Even though it was during Corona, we were able to jump through all the different hoops to get here a few months before we made Aliyah. It was a very short visit, but we were able to see the neighborhood, see the apartments we were renting. We visited the school that we were sending our kids to, and that was extremely, extremely helpful, because then when we got off the plane and you're just feeling so overwhelmed with everything, you know what the neighborhood looks like, you know where the school is, you spoke to the principal. So it really, really helps if you can make a trip beforehand to do those things. And I would also just say not to expect your experience to be like anyone else's experience, because everyone goes through different things. It depends what neighborhood you move to. It's, there's just so many different experiences. So a lot of people would tell me when we moved, okay, don't worry, your kids are going to understand Hebrew by Hanukkah and they're going to speak Hebrew by Pesach. That did not happen. But now, like over 2 years in, I see that, okay, you know what? They're on their own path and their own journey. And once you kind of take that and you're like, that's great if that was your experience, it wasn't my experience. So I just don't expect, like when you hear these general overarching statements, I just expect you're going to have your own experience. It's going to be really special, really unique, and overall really, really wonderful. Just a few more tips that I would say. When you move, if you're moving with kids, really kids of any age, I would say, as long as they're not toddlers anymore, so 4 or 5 years old and above, I would say that getting them into chugim, if you can, like after school activities, is really, really helpful. It helps with their like social integration. It also helps with the language and everything, and it's fun. So just from every aspect, I think getting your kids involved in chugim is really important. And also there are different like Tnuot Noar here. So there's B'nai Akiva, there's Ezra, there's Ariel, depending on your neighborhood, depending on specifically your hashkafa, there's different youth groups. And the way it works in Israel is the youth groups usually have a peulah, an activity once a week, and on Shabbat. So that also really helps with all the things I mentioned before, socially, language, the kids feeling happy and well-adjusted. So I would say chugim and the Tnuat Noar are two like really, really big things to get your kids well-adjusted. And the last few things that I would say is that it took some time, but I've learned not to be offended by how Israelis speak. It's just a cultural thing, and they really love you and they really want to help you, and you kind of have to like not leave your American or wherever your Anglo manners at the door, but just know that like they're there to help, as even if they're a little rough around the edges, and that there's just this feeling of home and belonging that is you can't find it anywhere else, because it doesn't exist anywhere else, because this is our only home. So it's something that I like, you feel it, and you feel it every single day wherever you go. It doesn't matter. It's just the feeling of home and belonging that, again, it's impossible to get anywhere else.
Thank you, Naomi. Appreciate it. All right, Asher, you guys are up.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Good evening, good morning, depending wherever you are.
Thanks for having us on. Okay, so I'm Dahlia. This is Asher. So we made Aliyah summer 2022. So not this past summer,
About
but
a year and a half.
year and a half ago, from Los Angeles, California. We came with our 3 kids who are 10, 8, and 5, and I was at the time, and I was 8 months pregnant. So we had our Sabra baby soon after arriving.
And that went to what Rafi said earlier. We came July 2022. A lot of people, as Rafi said, tend to come August. They like to finish up their summer camps in America. And we definitely feel like that was, again, we kind of were forced into it by the pregnancy, but we can't stress how helpful we felt it was, because we got off the plane July 13th, about a little under 2 months before school started, and our kids had 7 weeks to enjoy being in Israel, not jumping into the first day of school and the challenge that brings. So they kind of gave a bit of a runway for us to help us with our landing.
Yeah. So we moved to Modi'in, and specifically the neighborhood of Buchman. We chose it mainly because it was an Anglo community, which I personally think it is important for people coming from America or from an Anglo place. I think there's this sense of, I think for many of these neighborhoods, like you just kind of are absorbed, and people know where you're coming from, know what you need, and there's so much support, and I think that is really important. So yes, your kids may learn Hebrew slower, but I think it is really important. So we chose it because it was a great community. We liked the schools, we liked the location. It was 30 minutes, give or take, from Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. We like that it's a city because it has like an infrastructure. And so far we really like it. So our first year when we got here was really just to like focus on acclimating our kids, acclimating ourselves, learning just how to live here, you know, and we had to acclimate quickly because the medical system, because we had the baby. And so you kind of just like are thrown in. But yeah, so even though we had a lot of, you know, it's challenging your first year, but it was the best decision we've ever made. People, you know, are asking us now that the war started, like, are you coming back? Do you regret it? And even more so, like we just feel so grateful that we live here, so happy to live here. We just feel a part of our people, our nation. And no, like even more so, we love living here. And yeah, and
maybe a little bit about our Aliyah process. I don't know, you know, obviously there's a nice crowd here tonight. If some of you are in this process and we're thinking about this process, the process, like Rafi says, it takes a bunch of months. You know, when you look at that for initial checklist, it's a bit daunting. You know, you have the pre-Aliyah, you have the paperwork, you're talking about a lift, you're talking about, you know, finding a rental, or your work situation, and you're making all these arrangements. It's a little daunting, but you get through it. With Olim Advisors, where we were connected to Olim Advisors probably at the perfect time in our, you know, we'd already done a lot of the paperwork and we were moving towards the next phase about what happens when we get here. In July of 2022, Mr. Adapinem was extremely backed up. And thankfully I was connected with Laura at Olim Advisors. And right away she was like, you know, she ran through their process for me and explained what they do. And it was an amazing fit. You know, people we know came that summer, landed, and didn't have access to Mr. Adapinem for 2 months. We landed on a Wednesday, you know, 11 a.m. We were at Mr. Adapinem the next morning with Laura, who literally did everything. You know, it sounds cliche and crazy, but she held our hands, so to say, brought us to Mr. Adapinem, brought us to the bank, brought us to Mr. Adaklita, to the DMV, things that, you know, everyone thinks about the difficulty of the paperwork before Aliyah, but in my opinion, without Olim Advisors, the after Aliyah is actually more challenging. And we were very fortunate to have made that connection and have that advantage and the benefit. And it really made something that a lot of people have struggled with, something so much smoother. And even now, you know, a year and a half in, there's been questions I've had, and I've texted Laura, and there's a WhatsApp group, and it's amazing to have the support, but also the resource. And it's been a tremendous benefit. It's helped our process a lot.
So also, Naomi, actually, you told me about Olim Advisors. I remember texting you at work. So Naomi is actually the one that told me to call them, and I'm happy we did. Yeah. Okay, so our 3 tips are kind of like generic, but
well, I think they're generic, but I think they fit everybody in their own way specifically. I think when you make Aliyah, obviously, as we mentioned, there's challenges and pluses and minuses and everything, but I think you always have to have tunnel vision. You have to understand you want to make Aliyah, you want to live in Israel. You have to look at the big picture. So there's going to be points, whether you're having struggles with paperwork or making decisions or emotions, it's obviously extremely difficult. But you have to have that tunnel vision, say, hey, we want to make Aliyah. This is our end game. We want to be there. It's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging, but we need to focus on the prize and know that that's what we want to do. And it's going to, sometimes there's a little pain to gain. So you have to keep that in mind always, you know, have that Israeli flag and that image of that, your family in front of it as your end game goal, and focus on it, and don't let anything detract you from it.
Okay. And the second one is, I think it's very important. Like, okay, when you're moving, you're making a lot of decisions and you're like, where am I living? Like, and you don't know, you know, you're talking to like a million people, which is important. Like, talk to as many people as possible, get a lot of information. But at the end of the day, you have to figure out what's best for your family. And you have to just make, like, nothing is perfect. So like some communities have this and some communities have that, and some schools are better. But you kind of have to like choose a few things and like prioritize them. Like, okay, the school is better. I don't know, like whatever your list is, prioritize it, because I mean, make a list and kind of like work off of that, because you're not getting everything. You're just, it's not you don't just like choose it's like you're gonna get a few things, and I mean, and it ends up working out. Yeah, so prioritize what's important to you, and also like kind of filter through the advice, like get all the advice, collect everything, learn, talk to as many people as possible, but then kind of refocus and be like, okay, this may not be good for them, but it may be good for me. But definitely talk to a lot of people, because people have done it and people just want to like hand over, like at least I do, like I just want to be like, okay, here, like do what I did, but like obviously do what works for you. But it's like we want to help you, you know, like Olim, people who've done it want to help the people, and then we want to, it's like a pay it forward system. And
Right.
yeah. And then also the last thing is really, I personally think is important to be really flexible and like positive, and also like focus, like things aren't bad, they're just really, really different. Like the healthcare system, like, you know, or the schools, like things are really different. Like the systems in place are very different, but you know what? Try to focus on the good stuff and try to see the good and what your kid is gaining from it, as opposed. So I think just being positive, focusing on the good, having low expectations, and just like being positive is really important. And also, like, I don't know if you're giving out our contacts, but we're happy to help anybody who has questions like specific about different things. And yeah, hope that was helpful.
Amazing, that was, and I agree with you completely, Dahlia. I think that managing expectations is key. You know, we tell people you can't bring your lifestyle with you, and in many cases you shouldn't. You know, you'll find maybe your apartment's going to be smaller, or your house is going to be smaller, or maybe you have one car. I think it's very important to manage your expectations, to realize that there's good and bad in every place that you go to. But like you said, to really be, you know, to focus on the positive. I think it's so important, not just for families that come with kids, because when we talk to families, they keep talking about the kids and being happy for them, but it's so important also that the parents are happy as well. You know, it's a life-changing decision, and everybody should benefit from it. And so I completely agree with you. I think the mindset is really key, and it's going to take time. You know, I think it's going to take weeks and months and maybe longer to adjust, and there'll be tough days and easier days. And I think as long as you focus on kind of the end, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel, I think that you'll get through that. So thanks. I think that's great advice. All right, Lillian, up to you.
All right, I just had to unmute myself. Hi, my name is Lillian Aharon. I live in Efrat with my husband and my two older boys, Michael, who is almost 19, and Nate, who is 15. And we moved July of 2021. So when we got here, they were 13 and about 17, which is really, really tough ages. First of all, I would like to just say that I remember being on an Olim Advisor webinar prior to making Aliyah, and I found it so helpful. And that's just one of the reasons why I'm so glad to be here, because I hope that this can be helpful in the way that you guys were helpful to me. So that's I just wanted to make sure to point that out and say that.
Thank you.
So thank you so much. All right, so I remember a few things about making Aliyah that stand out to me. The first thing is that documentation is really important, and I remember that there are really little things to pay attention to. I know that I had a discrepancy between my passport and my birth certificate. My middle name was not on my birth certificate, but it was on my passport because my mom said, "Oh, I just liked it, so I added it when you got your social security card." And then it went onto your passport, but it never made it onto your birth certificate. So I know that the Jewish agency didn't like that discrepancy. And so small things like that are really important to pay attention to sometimes, to make sure that you have, everything you need in terms of documentation. And then I made it a point to call every week and just say, "Hi, how's my application going? Is there anything else that you need from me? What can you do?" I didn't just sit and wait for a phone call to come in, because I felt like, um, you know, at some point I did learn the hard way that they had sat on something for several weeks, and I guess I could have called and found out that they still needed information from me. And had I made that phone call during that time, I would have been ahead of the game. So I would definitely say, call, don't be afraid to check up and just say, hi, this is just my friendly phone call. I'm sure you're sick of hearing from me, but I just want to make sure that everything's okay. So I found that really beneficial, and that really worked in our favor. So again, we arrived July 1st, 2021. And yes, arriving in July was fantastic. I'm so happy we did that. It gave the boys time to just rest. It gave us time to tour around. It gave us time to look and say, get comfortable in your new house, in your new routine, and then start school. So I have an interesting school situation that happened with us because my kids were older. um, it wasn't so easy to just put them in school and say, you'll figure it out, don't worry. We really had to think really hard about what we were going to do, especially with our older boy, because starting as a junior in high school and then having to take the exams, the bagurot, to be able to graduate high school was pretty much impossible for him. So we were told it's best if you send your son to YTA. So living in Efrat is about 30 minutes by car, 35 minutes by car, maybe, to the school, but it was more like an hour and 10 minutes by bus, and it was like 2 buses and a train. And my son had a lot of sensory issues, and being in a crowded bus was so hard for him. And so for the first few months, that was a really big challenge for all of us, for us to have to send him to Jerusalem every day, and then also for him to be exposed to morning Israel rush we moved from Boca Raton. So if you can imagine, we were just always in a car driving down nice, big, wide, comfortable streets. And my son had never really been on public transportation. So to go from Boca easy life to taking trains to Jerusalem, that was really hard. And so in the end, he did end up only staying for 3 months. And then we had to find another option for him. And what we did was we put him in an online homeschool program, which ended up being fantastic for him. It was exactly what he'd always wanted. And the program gives him an American diploma from a school in New Jersey, and it had a Jewish and a secular studies program, and he did both. But an interesting, amazing experience that happened was that while my son was traveling to Jerusalem, a Marvel superhero movie came out in theaters. And God forbid my son should miss the opening of a Marvel movie. And so here's this boy who is petrified of being on the bus, but because there was a Marvel movie in theaters, he was committed to figuring this out. So he opened his Move It app and he said, I can take a bus and then I can walk and then I can go to the theater. And then at that point, he didn't have a green pass. So he had to figure out in Hebrew, which he didn't know, how to get a COVID test to get a temporary green pass, and then go into the theater and make the movie. And you know what? He did it. Yeah. He did it by himself. Because the truth is that things can sometimes be scary, but when you really, really want something enough, you're going to find a way to make it happen, and you're going to acclimate, and you're going to get it done. And so that was just such a beautiful moment in our Aliyah story, because it gave me the reassurance that he can do this. He can function in Israeli society. He can go outside his comfort zone. And I really loved that. Another thing is that my kids, obviously, he loves Marvel. So my kids are really not into sports. And so we were at a loss in terms of what kind of hoop to put him in, what kind of after school program to put him in. And for him and what he liked, there really wasn't anything. So in the end, we decided to create something. So we created something called the Geek squad. And we ended up opening a chug in our home for kids who liked Harry Potter, Percy Jackson, Marvel superheroes. And we had like-minded kids come to the house once a week to watch a snippet of a movie or to do a trivia game. And so just because something might not exist doesn't mean that it can't be created or that you can't get your needs met. You just sometimes have to think outside the box to do it. And then one more thing. Let me see. Oh, yes. Okay. So in the beginning, so for my younger son, school has been really challenging. In the end, we ended up sending him to a school in Beit Shemesh. So he takes a hasa'a, a transportation unit that is specific for the school, not public transportation. And he goes to Beit Shemesh for school. It's like a special school, small class sizes, mostly English speaking. And he was very overwhelmed by the commute. It was like an hour and 10 minutes each way. And so we spoke to the school and we said, I'd really like to come up with a plan for how we can make this easier for him. And in the end, again, this is thinking outside of the box. This is saying, okay, we have certain needs that we need to be met in order for everybody to be comfortable and less stressed. And so how can we get these needs met? And one of the needs that we knew would be great for my 15-year-old, for Nate, is that he got to choose one day a week where he could take a day off from school, one day. So he got to choose, and the principal was fine with it, and the teachers were absolutely okay with it. And so he got some autonomy. And I mean, the principal said it can't be every Sunday because that's what he wanted. He wanted it to be every single Sunday. So he would have a Saturday night and it would feel like America. But it had to be like every other Sunday and then one other day during the week. So for him, that gave him such a sense of autonomy. And it gave us the ability to negotiate and say, okay, you're really feeling really tired. You couldn't sleep last night. Why don't you take Wednesday off of this week? And it made him so happy and so comfortable. And so that is, again, thinking outside the box in terms of integrating into, this new way of being, especially, school on Sunday mornings is so difficult in the beginning because you're so used to just having your Saturday nights free and then your Sunday mornings available. So those are my tips. And of course, if anybody would like to learn a little bit more about Efrat, we live in the Zayit. We live across the street from Rabbi Shlomo Katz's shul. It's beautiful and incredible and meaningful. And I feel honored to be in the Shirat David orbit. And we really love it. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy and honored to answer them.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing that and for the great advice. Appreciate it. All right, Harriet, you're up.
So I've been muted because I've got a problematic puppy that
Okay.
I didn't want to be interrupting. So hi, everybody. First, I just want to thank Olim Advisors for this opportunity to share my experience. Maybe it'll be helpful. And I'm definitely available for more conversation if anybody wants to talk.
Sure.
So my experience is, briefly, I was 76 years old when I made Aliyah last April. So just this past April. I left a small community in northern Washington state where I owned a house. I had a wonderful garden in a community I had retired to and had been in for about 6 years. I had a dog that I adored. I was divorced. I had no kids. Most of my family is in Cleveland, Ohio, and most of my dearest adult friends are in the San Francisco Bay Area. I had lived in a lot of different cities over the years, mostly for work, and I'm pretty good at making friends and finding a community. So plopping myself into Israel didn't feel quite as daunting as it might have otherwise. I'm not what's considered religious here. I was raised conservative. as an adult, I migrated to all kinds of alternative things and finally to Reform. And I ended up belonging to the only synagogue in Bellingham, Washington, which is Reform. So I knew from the get-go that finding a community that I felt comfortable in religiously was maybe not going to be as easy as for other folks that are more observant and more religious than I am. Let's see. I've studied in Israel for the last several summers, COVID in between, and usually spent several weeks in Jerusalem on either side of my studying. And I had decided 10 years ago I wanted to move here, and then life got in the way. But then when it finally became clear that I could do it, I was pretty sure that I wanted to live in Jerusalem because I knew it. I had one friend here. I had fallen in love with the city when I first came 10 years ago, etc. But I did decide that it would be prudent of me to do a pilot trip and see a couple of other communities. So last October, a year ago, I set up a month to be here. And through a series of connections of old friends, I ended up being able to stay in somebody's apartment, and I met all the people in her building. And I really started establishing a support system there that has served me well. And these are now people that are friends still. We just did a Hanukkah party over here on Wednesday night. It was fabulous. But I did this trip, I did the pilot trip, I talked to a lot of people. As somebody else had said, just talk to people, talk to people, talk to people. It's really important that you get lots of perspectives and do your best to try to understand what different communities are like before you dive into making some final decisions. So the neighborhood in Jerusalem that I chose ultimately, which was a no-brainer in some ways, is the kind of southeast neighborhoods, Baca, Tapio, German Colony, Katamon, are a lot of Anglos, and probably of all of Jerusalem, more people who are either secular or Reform. But at the same time, I also feel very committed to learning Hebrew and to being able to socialize with and spend time with folks that have lived here longer or are native Israelis and who speak Hebrew fluently. So Ulpan is my friend. One of my tips is learn Hebrew. If there's any way that you can start learning Hebrew before you leave wherever you're living now, do it, because that was one of the biggest obstacles to my feeling comfortable. I've been here now for about 8 months, and I am learning, but it's not easy. And I'm sorry I didn't devote more time before I left to getting a little bit more stable with Hebrew. But I went through all the administrative stuff that's all been described. It's a pain in the neck. I'm here to tell you, don't think it's anything else, but it's doable, and and Nefesh B'Nefesh is great. And I'm sure Olim Advisors is great in supporting you. I didn't feel like I needed these folks at that time, but I knew that when I got here, I was going to need lots of help. So I signed up with them for when I got here, and they were a lifesaver. I want to shout out to Raquel Pilzer, who I think is on this webinar. She held my hand, as someone else said, through everything, got me all the appointments. Mizraha Neem was still way backed up when I got here. Salaklita, everybody, all of it would have been totally impossible with my level of Hebrew. And she acted in my stead and made sure that all the T's were crossed and I's dotted, and got me well set up, including getting my utilities set up as routine debits out of my bank account. And you name it. So I couldn't have done it, all of this without her. I will say that one of the biggest or most important elements or aspects of my adjustment here has been that I have reached out to as many people as I already knew and to anybody that showed the slightest interest in me, and made sure that I made a connection, set up Shabbat lunches and dinners, go to movies, go for walks, have coffee. Coffee's a big thing. Everybody has coffee. You can't find a seat in a cafe on a Friday morning. Just because, again, because I was here, I'm here alone. And I don't have any family here. Creating a support system was really important for me, and knowing that I had friends that that I could spend time with and socialize with, and we're kind of on the same page politically and religiously and et cetera, et cetera. So that was really, really important. I joined a synagogue right away and made sure that I spent time with the rabbi, met with him a few times, and fortunately, a lot of people speak English, so I'm starting to integrate into Kol HaNeshama here in the neighborhood. People ask me if I'm happy if I'm here, if I'm happy that I'm here. Am I glad I made this decision? And I gotta say, I don't know yet. I've been here 8 months. It's been chaos politically. Now there's a war. Everything I've tried to do here, as Rafi was implying earlier, has been so different than what I am used to in the United States. And in my head, I knew that I shouldn't expect a US experience, but the reality of it was way more intense than what I expected. And that's not to discourage anybody by any stretch. It's to advise you to keep your expectations managed. Again, as somebody said, nothing happens here the way you think it's going to, the way people tell you it's going to, the way you would like it to. It's just a different way of life, a different infrastructure, a different bureaucracy, a different way of doing business and socializing and all of it. And being as old as I am, I'm pretty ingrained in the US way of doing things. Many of you who are younger may have an easier time of it, but for those of us who are older and really have 60, 70 years under our belts of doing things the American or the South American or European way, it is an adjustment. All of that said, I am really glad I'm here. This was a really good decision. The war makes me even more glad that I'm here. I really wouldn't be anywhere else. And I will continue adjusting and learning to make my way in this society. And the more Hebrew I can learn, the better off I'm going to be. And I agree. A couple of people said, create a soft landing for yourself. Make your Aliyah process as uncomplicated as possible, because there's a gazillion moving parts. I would also say, though, that bring some things with you that you love, that make your new place, your new apartment, your new home feel like home, feel familiar, feel like you can settle in and say, I brought a big collage that I had made of my brother's life. He had passed away about 10 years ago. And for his memorial, I made this collage that I treasure. And as soon as that got hung on the wall, I took a deep breath and felt like, okay, I'm home. I'm here. All is well. So, lesson about a few things that you love. Be flexible, be patient. They have to be your mantras. That's what everybody told me, and they were absolutely right. So with that, I leave you and wish you the best in your journey.
Thank you so much, Harriet. Appreciate it. Okay, now we're going to get to the tachlis, as they say in Hebrew, some of the practical things that you need to be aware of, as you're planning for it. So the first thing is, as a few people mentioned, find out what documents you need to submit. You can go to Nefesh B'Nefesh if you're making Aliyah from North America. Go to the Jewish Agency. There's a number of documents, a number of hoops you have to jump through, and so you want to make sure that you're on top of that and ahead of the game. The second thing is thinking about the lifestyle that you want. And for many people, this is a chance, an opportunity to kind of start a new chapter in their life. And maybe they've always wanted to live near the beach, or maybe they want to live in a city environment, or maybe they want to live near a farm or different weather. It's not just moving to Israel, it's deciding what your lifestyle, what you'd like your lifestyle to be. Excuse me, and that takes time to think through, because there's so many options from communities and lifestyles and things that I mentioned. So it's really important to do that earlier on, and then you can plan accordingly based on your preferences. Another thing that will really dictate where you live is your budget. So it's the cost of your residence, or whether you're renting or buying an apartment or a house. It's also the cost of living. So you need to think through, and Nefesh B'Nefesh has a great sample budget that they have for single people, for couples, for families. If you would like to see that, just email me and I'd be happy to send you the link to the budget. But that's something that you need to do beforehand, because you don't want to get to the situation where you're living in Israel and you're financially stressed or insecure. That's the last thing that you want to do. To go along with that, thinking through what you're going to do for a living is really important. Now, most companies won't hire you until you actually are living in Israel, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't do the legwork beforehand. And what I'm referring to is really thinking about the type of industry you'd like to work. Maybe again, you'd like to reinvent your career, not just stay in your current profession. So thinking about the industries, thinking about different companies that are in those industries, finding people that you can reach out to and that you can network with, and you can talk to them and say, hey, I'd like to just hop on a Zoom call and just, get your advice, really brainstorm with you. These things all take time. And if you can do a lot of that beforehand, then when you get to Israel, the amount of time and effort that it will take to find a job will be that much less. If you own a home or a car, you have to think about what you want to do. Do you want to rent your home? Do you want to sell your home? Do you want to sell your car? Do you want to donate your car? These are things that will take time, especially if you want to sell your home. You want to, make sure you do any kind of remodeling and renovations. You want to try and time it right. So these are things that can take some time. And so it would be ideal for you to think about it sooner than later. Once you get to Israel, if you want to buy a home, then you should start doing the research. And I'll talk about this in a couple of minutes. There's so many different options. There's so many different neighborhoods. There's so many different communities. It used to be beforehand that people would only consider the Anglo bubbles, the big cities that have large Anglo communities. But now people are much more flexible. They're much more likely to look at other cities that have more of a mix, or maybe it's new and emerging communities. And so it really takes a lot of time to do the research, as a number of you mentioned already, to talk to different people and to really try and figure out where you want to move to from a community point of view, as well as from a residence point of view. So keep that in mind. And last but not least, reach out to us as soon as possible. Let's have a conversation. We are happy to hop on a call, just answer your questions, give you some advice, even if you're not thinking about making Aliyah now. Maybe it's a year, 2 years down the road, or maybe even further. Naomi and I, we have a wonderful team of advisors, are more than happy to just talk to you and guide you and share some tips and advice that we think will help you as you go through this process. Okay, and then the last point that I wanted to focus on is, aspects of buying a home that a lot of buyers don't know. And obviously, buying a home in Israel, buying a home anywhere for that matter, is such a big investment and such an important decision, but even more so in Israel, because the process is so different from what most people are familiar with. So the first thing is, a lot of people reach out to us and ask us, can we buy a home from abroad? And the answer is Absolutely, you can. Especially during COVID, there were so many people that bought homes sight unseen. Now, that means that you need to have the right support team. So in addition to our advisors at Olim Advisors, you have to make sure that you're working with the right realtor, the right mortgage broker, the right real estate lawyer. To really, these are people that will act as, in essence, your eyes and ears on the ground and really make sure that your interests are protected. Now, ideally, if you can come on a pilot trip to check out communities, check out homes, that's always preferable. But if for whatever reason you can't, then as long as you're working with the right team here in Israel, then it's something that is absolutely doable. Another thing I want to mention to you is this concept of buying on paper and a discount. So what buying on paper means that you're buying in a new building or new development that's not built yet. And there's a discount that developers will typically give somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15%, because they want to attract and incentivize people to buy before the project is complete. And so, there's a lot of developments that are being planned and then being built. You want to make sure that you're working with the right developers. You want to make sure that you're working with the right lawyer to protect your interests. But it's something that is exciting for many people because they're moving into a new project, a new building, a new community, a new neighborhood. And like I said, financially, there is very often a benefit to that as well. Another question that we get a lot is, can foreigners get a mortgage in Israel? And the answer is absolutely yes. It's not as straightforward as if you were living in Israel, but we've helped many foreign buyers buy people maybe who don't even want to make Aliyah. They just want to buy a home in Israel as an investment, or maybe they want to make Aliyah down the road. Again, you have to make sure that you're working with the right people to get you through this process. But it is something that's worthwhile looking into, especially since right now mortgage rates in Israel are lower than the States and other countries. So it's something that you should consider if you want a mortgage. If you don't want one, that's fine too. A lot of people will pay cash for a property, but it is something that is available. The next thing just to be aware of is the purchase tax. The purchase tax for Israelis is typically 8%. Sometimes it can be even higher than that if you're buying a really expensive property. Now, as an Oleh, somebody who makes Aliyah, there's a pretty big discount where you will pay as low as 0.5% on the home that you're buying. You have to meet certain requirements, and it's something that we can further explain to you, but it's just something that you need to be aware of as you do your budget, that there is a purchase tax that one may have to pay on a home. If you're making Aliyah, and you can actually buy a house before you make Aliyah and then get the money reimbursed, but it is something that you need to be aware of and take into account. And the last thing is that demand is picking up for a number of reasons. We talked about anti-Semitism and people wanting to move for that reason. We've talked about the fact that there are a lot of Israelis that are coming back to Israel now, and so they're also looking to buy. We've talked about the fact that the demand has just been always been strong. Israel is the real estate market here is really very hot. Things sell very quickly, and I'll just share with you a quick story. We have a realtor who we work with who heard about a new development, a new building that was being built, and this realtor has a very wealthy client who, in essence, approached the developer and said, look, we want to buy the entire building from you. We love the location. We have family and friends, people that want to move. We'll just buy the entire building. And the developer said, thanks, but no thanks, which just was shocking. But in essence, what he said is, you know what? We know that demand is going to keep picking up. We know that we can charge more and more for our apartments as time goes by, as we build the building. And so in essence, they walked away from that. So I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form that you quickly jump into this. It's a huge decision. You want to make sure that you do the proper due diligence and research, but just do be aware of the fact that the demand is increasing, and I believe, and people in the industry believe, that will continue to happen. So if you are thinking about buying something in Israel, you want to move and you want to do that sooner than later. Okay, so that was really the content that we wanted to go over. There are a few questions that have come up here. I know we're running into a bit of a time problem, but I do want to go through some of the questions with everybody. And let me just
Rafi, while you're doing that, I just want to jump in and say, anyone who has any more specific or personal questions, reach out to us. That's why we're here. So we're happy to answer if there's any specific questions, anything we didn't get to cover in this webinar, please reach out to us. We want you to reach out to us. We want to try to help you and answer whatever questions you have.
Great, thank you. So let's just go through some of the questions here. So there's a question about finding a job. So we talked about that it is more challenging to find a job, and people want to know, well, if you don't have a job, how do you decide where you want to live? And so a lot of that depends on the nature of your job. If it's something that you have to go into an office, then you should really look at the different centers of employment. Either it's in the center of Israel, Tel Aviv area, or there's up north, and also down south. You know, there are a lot of options, a lot of employment options besides just the center, but that's where most of the companies do operate in. So that's something that you'll need to keep in mind. If you're working remotely, then of course it doesn't matter. There's a question about people's financial situation, and the cities that we showcase today. We chose those because they happen to have large Anglo communities where a lot of people are looking to move to. They do happen to be more expensive, but I want to assure you that you don't have to come with a ton of money to be able to make Aliyah successfully. You don't have to live in these more expensive neighborhoods. There are a lot of options, and you don't have to buy something, right? A lot of people rent, and they rent long term, and it makes it much more affordable for them. So keep in mind, you don't have to come with a lot of money saved up. There are ways to manage your expenses and to live here pretty frugally. People talking about shipping things. So there are a number of shipping companies that you can reach out to. Depends on what you want to ship. We actually have a shipping guide that I mentioned, so you can go ahead and reach out to us, and we will gladly share with you the shipping guide, so you can get a sense of the cost, timing, and things like that. There's a question here about retiring. People who are retired and moving to Israel. And what I can say is that we've helped a lot of people in this age bracket over the past couple of years. I think a lot of people in the past who used to retire to Florida and Vegas and Arizona and California have now retired to Israel because their kids are here, their grandkids are here, or they just really like the lifestyle, the weather, the opportunities to be involved. My mother, for example, is here for a few months, and she's 75, and she's been volunteering and helping out. And so I think there's a tremendous quality of life here for people who are in that age group, and it's something that I definitely would be happy to talk to you about and introduce you to people who have retired and are really enjoying life here. Let's see here if there's anything else. People asking about kind of the religious affiliation, and I think, as Harriet mentioned, there's a lot of people that make Aliyah who are observant. There are a lot of people who are, Reform conservative. There are a lot of people that we help that aren't affiliated at all, and there's some sort of connection. There's something that just pulls them and that draws them in to Israel. And I really want to encourage you, no matter what your affiliation and beliefs are, there's a beautiful part of living in Israel, a connection to the country, to the nation, to the people here. And I don't want you to think, God forbid, that it's only for religious, only for observance. On the contrary, I think that people from all walks of life will find a connection, will find something very fulfilling in living in Israel. So I just want to encourage you to keep that in mind, and definitely talk to people who you can relate to, and that you will see who can share their stories with you. There's a question here about mortgages, and we work with a wonderful mortgage broker. I'm happy to put you in touch with them. They will go through the numbers, give you a sense of what you can afford, how much you can put down. The mortgages is, there's a lot of questions that go into it, and we just don't have enough time in this webinar to cover that. But by all means, reach out to me, and I will, I'll be happy to share that with you. I think we've covered a lot of the questions here. So again, I want to thank all of the presenters. I want to thank each one of you for taking the time to join us and to share your inspirational stories and your advice, and be willing to help out and guide people. Thank you so much for your time. And to all of you who have joined us, it's great, having you here. And I really want to encourage you to see, to go through this process. And if your dream has been to live in Israel, then let us help you make that dream a reality. So be safe, everyone. Have a great week, and we'll be in touch with you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.